The city was alive, with sound cars honking, street hawkers shouting, and children running barefoot across the dusty roads. In the middle of this restless movement walked Stella, her steps slow, her face thoughtful. She was not just another passerby. She carried a quiet heaviness, the kind that could not be seen at first glance, but revealed itself in the way her shoulders bent slightly forward, as though life had pressed down on her for far too long. Stella had grown up in a house where nothing came easy. Her father had once been strong, a man who believed that even the poorest soil could bear fruit if one was willing to sweat upon it. But time had stolen his strength, and sickness had weakened his body. Her mother, gentle but worn out, stitched clothes for neighbours to keep the family afloat. Stella was the eldest of 3 siblings, and she often felt the invisible weight of responsibility. She longed for a better life, not just for herself, but for her family. Each morning, she rose before the sun, helped her mother prepare food, and then left to attend classes at a local college. After lectures, she hurried to small jobs, sometimes serving tea in a tiny roadside shop, sometimes typing documents for busy traders who couldn't read well, sometimes selling vegetables in the market late into the evening. Her clothes were simple, her shoes worn thin, but her determination was fierce. People rarely saw her sacrifices. Some classmates laughed at her old bag, calling it grandmother's sack. Others looked at her faded dresses and whispered behind her back, but Stella had learned to swallow the bitterness. Tears might sting her eyes, but she reminded herself that the world had never promised fairness. That afternoon, after an exhausting day, she found herself behind the wheel of her small second-hand car. It was a car her uncle had once abandoned, too broken for his taste. With a little money saved and a lot of begging, Stella had bought it cheap. She often called it the stubborn goat because, like a goat, it refused to obey when she needed it most. But it was all she had. Without it, she could not reach classes on time, nor rush between the jobs that paid for her books and her siblings' school fees. The sun blazed down, its heat making the road shimmer. Stella's eyes burned with tiredness, but she kept driving. Suddenly, the car coughed, jerked, and slowed. She pressed harder on the accelerator, but it only groaned like an old man out of breath. Finally, it gave up altogether and rolled to a stop by the roadside. "Not today, please, not today," she whispered, her voice trembling with frustration. She stepped out, wiped the sweat from her forehead, and opened the hood. A faint smoke rose, carrying the sharp smell of burnt oil. She had no idea what was wrong. She tried turning the key again, nothing. People passed by, their eyes darting briefly at her, but no one slowed down. Minutes passed. The sun sank lower. Stella's heart grew heavier with each moment. Her thoughts raced. If I don't get home in time, Mama will worry. If I spend money on repairs, how will I buy the medicine Papa needs? Just as despair threatened to drown her, a voice interrupted. "Excuse me, looks like you're having trouble." Stella turned sharply. Standing a few steps away was a man tall, broad-shouldered, wearing a simple white shirt tucked into neat trousers. His tone carried no mockery, only genuine concern. His eyes, dark and steady, met hers without judgment. She hesitated. In her experience, not every stranger was safe, but something in his calm manner softened her suspicion. "Yes," she finally replied, her voice quiet. The car, it just stopped. He walked closer, careful not to alarm her. "Mind if I take a look?" Stella nodded reluctantly. The man leaned under the hood, examined the engine, and muttered to himself. His movements were practiced, confident, like someone used to fixing things with his own hands. Stella watched, her curiosity slowly replacing her worry. Within minutes, he tightened a loose connection, adjusted a few wires, and wiped his brow with the back of his hand. "Try it now," he said. Stella slid into the driver's seat and turned the key. The car coughed, sputtered, and then roared back to life. Her eyes widened with relief. "It's working!" she exclaimed, unable to hide her smile. The man straightened, a faint grin crossing his face. "It'll take you home, but don't push it too hard. This old thing is tired. Needs proper care soon." For a long moment, Stella just stared at him. Gratitude swelled inside her, so strong it almost broke through as tears. In a world where people hurried past her struggles, this man had stopped, noticed, and helped. "Thank you, really," she said softly. "You don't know how much this means." He shook his head. "It's nothing. Just be safe on the road." Their eyes met briefly, and in that glance, something unspoken passed between them. Not love, not yet, but an awareness, a spark. As Stella drove away, she kept looking in her rear-view mirror. The man Joshua, though she did not know his name yet, stood there, his figure growing smaller until it faded into the crowd. That night, lying on her bed, Stella replayed the moment again and again. She thought of his calm voice, the steadiness of his hands, and the kindness in his eyes. For the first time in weeks, hope flickered inside her. She didn't know who he was, or if she would ever see him again. But deep in her heart, she felt it the day everything changed had just begun. Stella awoke to the sound of soft footsteps and the faint clinking of porcelain. At first, she thought she was still dreaming. The sheets beneath her hands were silky smooth, far softer than the rough blanket she used at home. For a moment, her tired mind convinced her she had wandered into a hotel by mistake. But as her eyes fluttered open, the truth poured in like blinding sunlight. This wasn't her small room. This wasn't her world. She sat up quickly, her heart racing. Around her stretched a bedroom larger than her entire house. Golden curtains, thick as velvet, hung from tall windows that spilled warm morning light across the polished wooden floor. A chandelier dangled from the ceiling, its crystals catching the sun like scattered diamonds. Every corner whispered wealth, an alien language to her. Her breath caught. Where am I? The events of last night returned in a wave. The car breaking down, the storm, the man who had stopped to help Joshua. His calm, steady voice, the way he had looked at her with concern instead of suspicion. He had brought her here, to his home, his mansion. But why? "Good morning, miss," came a voice. Stella gasped. A maid stood by the door, dressed in a crisp uniform of black and white. She carried a silver tray with a teapot and a cup that looked too delicate to touch. Stella scrambled to find her shoes, her bag, anything to prove she didn't belong here, that she wasn't trying to take advantage. I think there's been a mistake," she stammered. "I shouldn't be here." The maid's eyes flickered over her, not unkind, but not warm either. "Mr. Joshua insisted you rest. He said you needed care." She placed the tray on a small glass table and straightened. Her tone was polite, but Stella sensed a stiffness behind it. "A quick question. Why you?" Her cheeks burned. "Please tell him thank you, but I should leave right away." The maid's lips curved into the faintest smile, one that didn't quite reach her eyes. "You'll have to tell him yourself. He doesn't like his guests running off." Guests. The word sat awkwardly in Stella's chest. She wasn't a guest. She was an intruder. Stella stepped out of the bedroom, her legs shaky, as though the polished marble beneath her feet might reject her. The hallway stretched endlessly, lined with portraits of stern-looking men and graceful women, their painted eyes following her as though judging her presence. Each step echoed. Each glance from the passing staff tightened her chest. They didn't need to speak. She could feel their thoughts. A poor girl. Who is she? Why is she here? At the base of a grand staircase, Stella stopped. The sight stole her breath again. The foyer was wide enough to hold the small church in her neighbourhood. Sunlight streamed through tall glass windows, landing on white lilies arranged in a crystal vase. Everything smelled faintly of roses and polish, too clean, too untouchable. And there he was, Joshua. He stood near the window, speaking to a butler, who bowed respectfully before leaving. Dressed in a simple white shirt and black trousers, he looked almost casual, yet he carried an air of command, like someone who never had to ask twice. His gaze shifted, landing on Stella. "You're awake," he said, his voice warm with relief. Stella froze halfway down the stairs. I'm so sorry," she whispered. "I shouldn't be here. Thank you for helping me, but I'll go now." Joshua's brows drew together. "Go? You can barely stand." He moved closer, each step calm but firm. "I didn't bring you here so you could stumble back into the storm." Her hands clenched. "But this place—" She gestured helplessly at the golden walls, the marble floor, the chandelier overhead. "I don't belong here." For a moment, silence stretched between them. Then Joshua smiled faintly, though it held sadness more than amusement. "Neither did I, once." Joshua guided her into a dining hall where a long table stretched farther than her eyes could follow. He gestured for her to sit, but Stella hesitated. Her fingers twisted nervously at the hem of her blouse. She felt the stares. 2 maids whispered near the doorway, pretending to polish silver. A gardener passed by the window, slowing as he caught sight of her. A butler placed a plate before her, his eyes careful, his posture stiff. Stella heard the unspoken words louder than any whisper. "She's not one of us. She's nothing but a street girl." Her appetite vanished. She pushed the food away gently, her throat tight. Joshua noticed. He leaned closer, his voice low. "Don't let them bother you." Her eyes darted to his. "But they're right. I don't belong here. I have nothing to offer. People like me." Her voice broke, shame swelling in her chest. "We're invisible until we're unwanted." Joshua's jaw tightened. For a moment, his usual calm cracked, revealing something harder. "People once said the same about me. I know what it is to be unwanted, Stella. Don't measure your worth by their whispers." His words struck her, gentle yet powerful. Still, the sting of humiliation remained. Hours later, Stella stood at the tall front doors of the mansion, her small bag clutched tightly in her hands. Joshua had offered her a room, safety, even kindness. But all she felt was exposed, like a sparrow in a palace of hawks. Every step in that place reminded her of the distance between her world and his. She thought of her parents, of her little siblings who needed her, of the neighbours who sneered when she returned from the city with nothing. If she stayed here, what would people say? That she had thrown herself at a rich man's mercy? Tears pricked her eyes. Gratitude battled with pride, and pride won. She couldn't stay. The butler opened the door without a word, his eyes sharp but silent. She stepped out, the sun blinding, the city road waiting. Her legs trembled, but her decision felt solid. Behind her, Joshua's voice called, firm, unyielding, "Stella." She froze. "Don't walk away from a chance fate gave you." His voice carried something she hadn't heard before, pleading, almost fragile beneath the strength. Her heart pounded. Slowly, she turned. Their eyes met, and in that moment, Stella realized her life was no longer just her own. The first few days in Joshua's mansion were like living inside a dream Stella had never dared to imagine. Yet the dream often turned sour the moment she remembered who she was. A poor village girl, barefoot and broken, lying under the same roof as a billionaire. The mansion was enormous, filled with shining marble floors, chandeliers that sparkled like falling stars, and wide staircases that seemed to go on forever. Everywhere she turned, she saw portraits of Joshua's family, stern faces of men and women in suits, dressed in wealth that seemed older than her entire village. The air smelled of lavender and rich polish, so different from the earthy dust of her home. But the beauty of the place didn't make Stella feel safe. Instead, it made her feel smaller, like an ant in a palace built for giants. The staff, dressed in neat uniforms, bowed politely when Joshua was around, but Stella saw the way their eyes changed when he turned his back. Whispers followed her everywhere. She doesn't belong here. Why is Mr. Joshua wasting his time on a street girl? Do you think she's trying to trap him? Each word cut through Stella like a sharp blade. She lowered her gaze whenever she passed them, clutching the simple dress she had been given to wear, wishing she could disappear. Joshua, however, seemed blind to their whispers. Every morning, he greeted her warmly. "Did you sleep well, Stella? The doctor said you need rest. Don't worry about anything here." His voice was gentle, his eyes kind, but Stella's heart ached. She wanted to thank him, but she also wanted to run away from the walls that made her feel like an intruder. One morning, she tried to help in the kitchen. She thought maybe if she worked, the staff would stop looking at her with contempt. She offered to chop vegetables, to wash dishes, anything. But the head maid, a tall woman named Miriam, pulled the knife from her hands. "You don't need to touch these," Miriam said coldly. "We don't need your kind making mistakes here. Just stay in your room, girl. Don't cause trouble." Stella's face burned with shame. She bowed her head and walked away silently, her chest tightening. Even in kindness, she felt like a prisoner. That evening, Joshua's cousin Adrian arrived at the mansion. He was younger than Joshua, tall and sharp-featured, with the arrogance of a man who had never been told no. The moment he saw Stella in the dining hall, sitting quietly at the far corner, his lips curled into a cruel smile. "Joshua," Adrian laughed, raising a glass of wine, "I heard rumors, but I didn't believe them until now. You really brought a beggar into this house?" Stella froze. Her fork slipped from her fingers, clattering against the plate. The sound echoed louder than thunder in her ears. Joshua's face darkened. "Adrian," he said firmly, "she's my guest. Show some respect." "Respect?" Adrian smirked. "For what? She doesn't belong here. Look at her, cousin. She's a stray dog you picked up from the streets. Do you really think she can sit at the same table as us?" The words stung deeper than any wound Stella had ever known. She stood quickly, her chair scraping against the marble floor. Tears threatened to spill from her eyes, but she refused to let them see her cry. I don't belong here," she whispered, her voice trembling. "Thank you for your kindness, Mr. Joshua, but I should go." She turned to leave, but Joshua rose from his seat, his voice echoing with authority. "Sit down, Stella. You're not going anywhere." His gaze shot like lightning toward Adrian. "And you, if you can't show respect in my house, then don't bother coming back." Adrian's smirk faltered, but he shrugged, sipping his wine again. "Do as you wish, cousin, but mark my words, people will talk. They always do." Joshua ignored him and gently pulled Stella back to her chair. "Don't let his words hurt you," he said softly. "You deserve to be here as much as anyone else." But Stella's heart was heavy. That night, when everyone else was asleep, she knelt by the window in her room, staring at the stars. Her whispered prayer rose into the silence of the night. "God, why did you bring me here? Why did you put me in a place where I don't belong? Please, show me what I'm supposed to do." Her tears fell silently onto her hands. She was grateful to Joshua, yet the shame and whispers around her grew heavier each day. Somewhere deep inside, she feared Adrian was right. Maybe she was just a poor girl, lost in a world that would never accept her. And yet, another voice whispered, faintly in her heart, a voice she tried to ignore. It said, "Stay, your story is not finished here." The days passed slowly, yet each carried its own weight for Stella. She was grateful to Joshua for saving her life and giving her shelter, but her heart remained restless. Each corner of the mansion whispered a reminder that she did not belong. The staff's sidelong glances, the hushed laughter behind her back, and the subtle sneers from Joshua's relatives all dug into her spirit like tiny needles. Joshua tried to ease her discomfort. He would invite her to dine at the long marble table, insisting she sit beside him, though she often wished to eat quietly in the kitchen. He encouraged her to speak freely, to share her thoughts, but words failed her. She often lowered her eyes, her hands twisting nervously in her lap, feeling like an intruder in a world too polished, too bright, too far from the dusty streets she once knew. One evening, Joshua's aunt, Lady Miriam, visited. She was tall, graceful, with sharp eyes that missed nothing. Her clothes were as elegant as her voice was cold. From the moment she stepped into the room, Stella felt small, like a shadow under the sun. "And who is this?" Lady Miriam asked, her tone laced with disdain, though her lips curved in a mock smile. "This is Stella," Joshua answered simply. "She's staying with us." "Staying?" Lady Miriam's brow arched. "In this house?" Her eyes scanned Stella from head to toe, lingering on her worn dress, her simple sandals, her lowered head. "Joshua, surely you jest. The mansion is no place for strays." The words stung Stella like a slap. She wanted to vanish, to sink into the floor. But Joshua's calm voice broke the silence. "She is not a stray," he said firmly. "She is under my protection." Lady Miriam's laugh was soft, bitter. "Protection? From what? Life itself? You do not owe charity to every beggar you find on the road, Joshua. Have you forgotten your place? You are the head of this household. Appearances matter." Joshua's jaw tightened. "Appearances are empty without compassion." The conversation ended there, but the wound it left in Stella's heart remained. That night, alone in her room, she wept quietly. Joshua had defended her, yes, but at what cost? She feared she was becoming a burden to him, a cause for ridicule among his kin. The next morning, determined to repay his kindness in any way she could, Stella slipped into the kitchen. She asked the maids if she could help with chores, but they laughed. "You? Cook? Clean?" One sneered. "You wouldn't know which end of the broom to hold." The others chuckled, and Stella's cheeks burned. Still, she picked up the broom and swept, clumsily, but with persistence. She polished silverware until her arms ached, fetched water until her hands blistered. They continued to mock her, but she ignored them. She would not let their scorn break her resolve. Joshua noticed the change. One evening, he found her scrubbing the stone floor with raw, reddened hands. "Stella," he said gently, kneeling beside her, "why are you doing this?" "I must repay you," she whispered, unable to meet his gaze. "I cannot just sit here, eating your food, sleeping in your house, while giving nothing in return." He took her hands in his, examining the blisters with concern. "You owe me nothing. Your life, your safety, that is enough for me." Tears welled in her eyes, but she quickly wiped them away. "I do not want to be a burden." "You are not," Joshua said firmly, his voice low but steady. "Do you hear me, Stella? You are not a burden." Their eyes met then, and something unspoken passed between them, a flicker of warmth, fragile yet undeniable. Stella pulled her hands away, her heart pounding. She turned back to her work, though her mind remained tangled with questions she dared not voice. As the weeks went on, the storm within her grew. Gratitude warred with pride. affection clashed with shame. She found herself drawn to Joshua's kindness, yet terrified of the hope it sparked within her. Could she, a girl from the streets, ever dream of belonging in his world? One night, unable to sleep, Stella stepped into the mansion's garden. The moonlight bathed the flowers in silver, the air cool and still. She sat on a stone bench, hugging her knees, whispering a prayer into the night. Lord, why have you brought me here? Why place me among riches I cannot touch, among people who do not want me? If there is a purpose, show me, give me strength. She did not hear Joshua's footsteps until he was close. He sat beside her in silence, watching the same moonlit sky. For a long time, neither spoke. Finally, Joshua broke the stillness. Do you know why I stopped for you that day? He asked quietly. Stella shook her head. Because I saw more than a girl in need, he said. I saw courage in your eyes, even as you lay wounded. I saw someone worth saving. Her breath caught in her throat. She turned to him, her lips parting to respond, but no words came. Instead, silence enveloped them again, heavy yet strangely comforting. The storm within Stella raged louder, but for the first time she felt she might not have to face it alone. Stella's days in Joshua's mansion began to stretch into weeks. Every morning she would wake up and still be surprised by the silk sheets, the golden curtains, and the quiet hum of air conditioning that made the entire place feel unreal. Yet even with such comfort around her, Stella's heart never rested easy. Joshua, true to his promise, had not asked anything of her. He treated her with a calm respect that surprised her. Whenever they spoke, it was never about her debt to him or about her tragic night in the bush. It was about ordinary things. He asked about her childhood, her parents, and how she had survived in the city. Sometimes he simply asked if she had eaten or slept well. But Stella noticed something else. Whenever Joshua left the house for business, the whispers in the mansion grew louder. The maids gossiped in corners. The butler, though polite, often gave her cold looks. She would overhear words like opportunist, gold digger, or stray. One afternoon, while she was walking past the dining room, she heard one maid say, "Can you believe it? A poor street girl, now walking in a mansion, as if she belongs here. What magic did she use on the master?" Stella froze. The words pierced her chest like a knife. She wanted to walk in and defend herself, but what could she say? That she hadn't asked for any of this. That Joshua had been the one to insist she stay. Instead, she turned away, tears burning in her eyes. That evening at dinner, Joshua noticed her silence. "You're quiet tonight," he said, his tone gentle. Stella forced a smile. "I'm fine, just tired." But Joshua's sharp eyes lingered on her. He didn't press, yet she could tell he knew something was wrong. The next morning, Stella decided to prove her worth. Instead of lounging in the mansion, she followed the staff to the kitchen. She rolled up her sleeves and asked to help with breakfast. At first, the cook laughed. "You? Cook here? This is not a street corner, girl." But Stella insisted. "Please, let me help. I know how to cook. I used to do it for my family." Reluctantly, the cook allowed her. And to everyone's surprise, Stella's hands moved with skill. She chopped vegetables quickly, stirred stews with confidence, and even baked simple bread with ease. By the time breakfast was ready, the entire kitchen was filled with a mouth-watering aroma. When Joshua tasted the food, he looked up with genuine admiration. "This is incredible. Stella, you made this?" She nodded shyly. "I just wanted to do something useful." Joshua smiled warmly. "Then from now on, you'll cook whenever you like. This house could use your touch." But not everyone was pleased. Joshua's cousin, Richard, who had arrived at the mansion that week, sneered openly. Richard was a tall, well-dressed man with sharp features and a pride that